Hi, I'm the True Wise Gamer, giving off my vast knowledge so you may understand games a bit better. So, Armored Core. It's a series that has been around for a really long time, since the PS1 era. But it's always been niche since it falls into a subgenre that I am just constantly annoyed we don't ever really get that much. That being mecha games. Seriously, the amount of mecha games out there are slim to none, and the really good ones are even slimmer to find. Seriously, it annoys me how little mecha games are out there. Like, why? Robots are cool, and it's just so annoying they don't import more mecha series here because corporations don't believe in making some money and that it must be bigger than Gundam, which is just impossible now. It's like, why must it? Seriously, a lot of Western people don't know there are still a lot of mecha anime out there nowadays, but they're hardly ever come over here, so it's hard to know. I'm just saying the amount should be more, and honestly, with Armored Core 6 being finally a thing, it fills my heart like a power reactor. And honestly, ironically enough, there's not a lot of real robot games either. That's mostly because we don't really want to deal with some of the aspects of that type of game. So, to be clear, let's actually explain what I'm talking about. Mecha series can actually be separated into two subcategories. The first one being Super. Super robot series are basically either have one mecha or multiple, depending on the series itself, that are different from other mechs or from each other, that are just uniquely themselves and have powers that can make them stronger than the usual grunt. A few examples are Gurren Lagann, Mazinger, Get a Robo. I'm glad Get a Robo is getting another anime soon, and also Transformers. Yeah, I didn't know that one until I was researching for this review, which is actually quite interesting because there is a bunch of Transformer games. There was one for the PS2 that I really want to try, but we should talk about that some other time. Real robot series are more focused on the minutia of mechas, and while they can focus on one particular mech, that doesn't mean they're easily replaceable, or they are just uniquely them, are the starting line of a new type of mech. Which, I know that sounds complicated. Like, the best examples of this are Gundam, usually follows this, but that's a whole other discussion. Voltems and Elgain. If you don't know those two, I don't blame you, just note they are sadly not known. Now, of course, like all rules, they can be bent and have exceptions. Like Gundam UC is a series which the mech in that series in and of itself is really falls under the super category, but is in a real robot series. Or Galgaigar, a super robot that has a lot of minutia that follows real robots. It's just important to realize that it's a rule made for us so that we can categorize stuff for fun. And the Armored Core series super heavily focuses on the real robot aspect, to the point it will have some oddities. More on that in a bit, since you'll see. But why are we talking about this game in particular and not the last game, or 5, or the first one? Well, for the interesting aspect of this game. That being, this game was the directorial debut of Miyazaki. Yes, Hidetaka Miyazaki, the Dark Souls. And it was because he worked on this game was he allowed to even take control of the original mess that was behind the Demon Souls development. Or at least that's my understanding. If I'm wrong, go ahead and tell me I'm wrong. But still, it's still interesting to see the first game he actually directed. So let us see how he did directing this game, as we must begin talking about Armored Core 4. Armored Core 4 begins with an explanation of what's going on, and it's a bit confusing. See, the series has a habit of both having a continuity, yet not at the same time. My understanding is that this game is either another continuity, or it's just the beginning of the continuity. But don't worry about it, okay? It's not important. You don't have to play the other games. This one is mostly self-contained, because there's a sequel, but that's a whole other thing. The basic world of the Armored Core series is that in any of the games, the world is pretty much bone. The corporations have basically taken over the world. And right now in this universe, they are in a semi-peace called Pax Economica, which is kept in balance by proxy battles handled by AC units of all groups that basically do corporate espionage on each other to keep the balance, so there's no one big corporation in charge. However, the balance of power will always not last long, and well, they begin to fight each other, and stuff happens. I don't have a better way to explain it other than stuff happens, since even on this replay, not a lot actually happens. Like, stuff happens, but that doesn't mean the game explains it in a way that makes sense, or it really affecting you all that much. Like, for example, there's a rebel group we handle really quickly on. What we don't actually learn in the game, and I had to look this up, but the rebel groups are actually done by the corporations to not only control the population, but also make it easier so that no one will notice what they're actually doing, trying to steal stuff from the other corps. There's a reason it's there, it's just not elaborated on why we should care about it. There's a scene in the game where Joshua O'Brien is attacking us, which in all fairness is because of a bad translation. Well, he's attacking us since his home is taken control by one of the remaining corporations, Omer. I swear on my life, it sounds familiar. If I remember it, I'll put it up screen. They want to use him to destroy Directorial, the place where you are stationed, because Raven, you, have been getting really good. So good, in fact, that they think they need to eliminate you so that everything can be a little more in their favor, so that way nobody has anyone else to challenge them, which... And I mean, like, you don't even learn this unless you play the game on hard mode, where it is revealed. Yeah, hard mode actually gives more dialogue while also being harder. And while this is interesting, it doesn't really make anything happening around the game that interesting in and of itself. And to be fair to the game, it's not like it's super focused on the plot, it's just that it's just very weirdly written. And it is, at least again, more focused on the gameplay, so if you don't care about the story, you could just play the game. And with that being said, let's actually talk about the gameplay. The gameplay is more sectioned off into missions that you could choose what to do, as your job is to get the thing you need to do and get it done as quickly as humanly possible, since the game rewards speed, and I just realized in all of my footage I could have made it blue. Anyway, the point is, speed helps a lot, all your missions, because they want it done quickly and efficiently. And sometimes that means getting a little hit, but that's all okay, because as long as you get the job done, you're at least getting something out of it. Heck, they are also willing to pay for some of the amount of damage you took, and any left over is given to you as a bonus. So trying to avoid any damage if possible is a good thing, but you don't have to worry about it too much. Though how you'll fare in a mission is all dependent on how you build your mech. See, in this game, you can build up your mech however you like, and can be optimized to handle the way you want to handle the next fight. And while sure what weapons you bring in matters, it also matters what type of part you're using. The parts come in all shapes and sizes. It can fundamentally change the way of how you play. Like if for example you go with a tank-like build, well, you can basically boost around. While it will help you move a bit, you're still on a tank, meaning that you're less maneuverable than certain other mech. Or to give it another example, say for example you want to use a sniper rifle. It's not only important what sniper rifle you're using, but it's also important about what type of arm and head unit you're using, because they affect a lot of other stats that you won't immediately see unless you go to this section, which, if you're wondering what all this means, it's a lot of complicated stuff. If you don't get it, I don't blame you. There are only certain numbers you really need to focus on, but otherwise, it is up to you to decide how you want to do it. Just like, do you want a weapon that focuses on reloading quickly but has not a lot of ammo? Or do you want to focus on a weapon that, yeah, can reload real quickly, but and it's not helped with so many things can go wrong in one mission that you might as well just say that sometimes your missions are just a luck of the draw. That is not to say it's always like that, it's just that a good chunk of the time you're going in blind and really don't know, and when you actually do it again it might become better, but overall because you just know more. Which I don't know why the game doesn't give you like a map before you enter so you have an idea of what you're dealing with. But in any case, let us actually talk about what you can do. Sometimes the missions are a little tricky, So you're better off sometimes just experimenting and seeing what you could do better. Like maybe bring in a different weapon that might do a lot more damage, or change to a part that lets you go a little quicker. In fact, if you want to actually get a little better, you can do previous missions so that way you can see, hey, maybe see how this build will help in the next mission, or just a simulator. But you might also have a problem of earning enough because you can replay missions, but you'll only gain more money that you didn't have before, which for a good chunk of the time you'll be strapped for cash, unless you figure out the way to gain a lot of easy money. You can gain a lot by fighting other cores. Yeah, the game rarely has you fight other armored cores, or in this case, mechs, as these mechs are called in particular, and you only do it like 5 times in the plot. In any case, you fight them so you can earn their bounty, and also since this isn't real, you don't have to actually worry about damage, so you could go all out in these fights. So how is it easy? Well, essentially, they still apply to the normal rules of ammo. So if you're careful enough and dodge really well, maybe use some of the maps you can choose to, well, take the damage for you, well, you could essentially make them run out of ammo and they really can't do anything. However, this rule applies to you as well, so be aware of that and bring a beam saber. And after a few fights, you'll pretty much have enough money to buy whatever you want, and hell, you can actually customize with those new parts as well, since they do give you their parts as well, which is really interesting, since it allows for a lot of customization, which I really did love, even if I didn't show it on here for some reason. Odd. And when I say the customization is a lot, there's a lot. It's really interesting. Though it doesn't really help all the time as the game is really hard. Like, unnaturally at times. See, some fights are just annoying, and that is just because some of the mechanics of the game are a little weird and don't function all that well. For example, aiming. Yeah, instead of pointing, which you still have to do, you have to aim, but also let your crosshair aim at the thing you want, because it auto-targets, meaning that if you want to target something in particular, there's nothing really to let you just say, hey, I want to target that thing in particular, which is really weird. It is not helped with some enemies can move really fast, meaning you have a hard time getting a good shot in every so often, especially against the other cores. Or sometimes the challenge is really obnoxious because, again, you're coming in with little information, and the options you do have just fundamentally go against how you would like to play. Like, for example, in one mission you have to deal with one big submarine that shoots big energy cannons at you while you are handling the other submarines around it and then it, because, again, that big ass submarine is going to deal a lot of damage to you. That's not to say that the challenge in and of itself is bad, it's just that the challenge is unfair because of, again, of that lack of knowledge. And that's not even to say that challenge isn't fun, it can be, but it's just annoying when that information isn't presented. So it's hard to actually balance yourself really well. It's not also helped when sometimes the weapons you can have available is limited and doesn't really feel all that impactful. Like, a grenade launcher in power is okay in some places, but bad against most foes who are very fast. Since it's just there, it just didn't feel like it was purposely, well, powerful enough, if you catch my drift. I know that sounds like a weird thing to complain about after just complaining about the speed thing. Though honestly, I think boosting up the power a bit of everything would have been nice, since some of these enemies are really tough because they can take so much damage. I think it's also just because of how it all feels. Like, the game's color palette is really bleh, and the sound is sort of muted, so it may have just feel like its impact is lesser. Which, I know it's there to invoke the dreary world that is built up, which is not to say it's not done well. It actually works really well. It's just sometimes harder for me to feel that impact. Plus, also, this type of vibe isn't for me. Like, in my mind, it actually feels more artificial, if anything, and not natural. Personally, I think I blame modern games from the 7th generation for my hate of this type of look. Maybe it's also because I like color and I don't hate fun. I had a point to all this. It's like, it looks fine, it's just not my thing. And to go back to the sound, the music's okay, it is subdued in most kinds, and when the battles are like getting more intense, it does bring itself up. It's just that the vibe it's going for is just, again, not for me. But I will say it does a great job of showing the world being constantly ravaged by countless battles and many mechs damaging the world. Like, if you use some laser attacks, they will actually glass the area around it, which is kind of like a cool detail there. I thought that was kind of cool when I noticed it. There's also the map design, which are actually pretty well done because there's a lot of variety between them, which allows for at least some challenges along the way. And sometimes the maps are at least big, where you will return to them, but you'll interact with them differently. Like, one point you'll be at one point of the map, and then another on the other side, doing something completely different, which is actually quite interesting. It's done really well, and I think the mission variety in and of itself is also interesting. While there are a few repeating ideas for missions, the situations around them and how you need to handle them are handled really well, which I think is amazing. Like, for example, during one of the desert missions where you're in the middle of the night and you need to destroy all your enemies. But due to how dark it is, you literally cannot see anything. So they have to send up flares to you every so often so that you can see them and defeat them, which is just really interesting. Or a stealth mission where you need to go over the city and try to get to an aerial base and destroy it before anyone notices. Like, there are a few annoying ones, but the vast majority of the missions are really well done. And if I had to complain about one mission, it's the mission before the final boss, which is just the worst. I hate it, I don't like it, I want it gone, why is it here? And that was pretty much this review for Armored Core 4. While this game is unique, there is something I haven't really mentioned. That being, I have already played this game. And I know, like, oh, okay, why is that important? Well, this is only because I wanted to mention something about me and this game in particular. You see, I actually don't like replaying games whenever I want. It's really actually very hard for me to replay a game unless I am in a particular mood. And the only reason why I replayed this game was because Armored Core 6 was coming out. So you can see my problem. I'm having a harder time kind of just vibing with this game in a nutshell. While I enjoyed replaying it, it's a good game, I just don't want to ever play it again. Which, I don't know, feels like an indictment against the game. But otherwise, I recommend it. And sure, throughout the game I was a bit negative. That's not to say that the entire experience wasn't good. It's just muted. I think that's the best way to put this game in a nutshell. A dreary, muted feeling. Which is something that sometimes everyone needs, but sometimes not always. At the end of the day, I wouldn't say, again, this game's good. I don't think I'll ever play it again, but it was fun to replay it.